Today on Locked On Canadians, we have a special crossover edition with a special guest to let us know what Noah Dobson will bring to the Habs, and then we can also give him the inside track on what Emil Heineman will do for the Isles.
You are Locked On Canadians, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to a special crossover edition of Locked On Canadians and Locked On Islanders. We want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick. I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. But today we have a very special guest for a very special crossover edition, and that's Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders, but also Locked On NHL. Gil, how are you doing?
I am good. It's great to be here with you guys today.
I'm really excited to get some inside track on Noah Dobson. Later in the show, we are also going to talk about Emil Heineman, what he can do for the Islanders. And then we're going to kind of compare the outlook for both teams, right? They're both teams in kind of a rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and you know, how bright are the futures for this team? Ian, did you have any burning questions about Noah Dobson to start?
Yeah, I think in the immediate aftermath of this trade, it's the main theme that I'm getting from Islanders fans and people who have watched him who may be a little upset with how this ended up, saying that he's a very turnover prone defenseman. He's, you know, from in Canadians terms, we think of like Mike Matheson, like a defenseman who likes to go north south but makes a lot of mistakes along the way. How much of that is truth? How much of that is a little bit of skewing after the fact? Like, what can the Canadians expect a guy who's going to treat the puck like it's a grenade, or do they have an actual puck moving defenseman on their hands?
I would say the answer is both. I mean, the issue with Dobson is consistency. The talent is definitely there. I mean, you saw the 70-point season in 2023, 2024. Last year, he struggled. Injuries around the organization, you know, for the team, part of that. But he's not a great defensive defenseman. And if you look at the statistics, last year, his giveaways, and I know in the NHL, giveaways are kind of hard to explain even sometimes, but his giveaways went way up last year. If you're playing Noah Dobson in his own zone, he is going to struggle at times. Turns the puck over, doesn't always get himself in the right position. You need to pair him with a very positionally sound defensive defenseman. And then, like, he played his best hockey on the Islanders defensively when he was paired with Zdeno Chara. Even though Zdeno Chara was in the last year of his Hall of Fame career, he knows where to be. He can cover for any mistakes. He's got the size and the reach to sort of reduce the impact of those positional mistakes that Dobson makes.
Yeah, I think that's why I think a lot of Canadians fans immediately went to they'll play Hudson with Dobson. And while that's, I think what we landed on was that's a fun option if you're down late in the third period and you're like, we got to all systems go. We have to throw something in the net. But I think, and most people I think have come to this conclusion as well, that Caden Gooley is probably the better fit to play with Dobson. Just a very solid defensive defenseman who can still move the puck, but you know, I think that's sort of a better fit if you're looking for guys who can complete one another, right? I think that's more because Hudson, you know, as much as I think his defensive play is a little bit better than a lot of folks give him credit for, especially given his size, that would just be two guys who are going the whole time. And you can't, I don't think you can have that if Dobson, you know, has issues with the puck like that. Is that why, you know, after the fact, it sort of has come out that him and Patrick Waugh didn't really get along well? Is any of that true? Like, is this why that sort of, I guess, reputation came out?
I will say this. Throughout last year and the portion of the year before that Waugh was coaching the Islanders, I did not hear anything problematic between the two. Now, you know, that doesn't mean it didn't exist. It just means it wasn't being made public. I don't think Dobson is a cancer in the locker room. I don't think he's someone who ignores his coaches. He just has certain skills and certain limitations to his game. And at 1 minute you're cheering and you think, wow, this is amazing. And the next minute you're like, what was he thinking?
Yeah.
So, and I think the bigger issue for the Islanders was just to pay $9.5 million a year for 8 years for a guy who has those consistency issues. I think if he lives up to if he gets a little bit more consistent, you guys will have a steal at 9.5 once like 3 years go by and a good offensive right shot defenseman will be making $11 million a year.
Right.
So, but getting him to that consistency will be a burden that the coaching staff in Montreal and his teammates to a lesser extent will have to work on with him.
And I do want to get into the value of the trade, but let's do that more when we're talking about the outlook for the Islanders,
Sure.
Because I think there's a lot of meat there. But we wanted to know if you had any questions about Emil Heineman for us.
Yeah. I think the first question I would have is about the car accident and what was the impact of it? Is he fully recovered as far as you know? How did his game change after it? And did it ever get back to normal, for lack of a better word?
I think what happened there with that accident was he was seeming to pick up some momentum right as that happened. I think when he came back, he was perfectly healed. Like it didn't seem like the injury was bothering him. He plays a very heavy physical game. So if he's not on that game, it's pretty easy to notice. He's a big guy. I mean, Marty St. Louis joked that, when he got hit and they all found out that he was okay, Marty joked that the car was totaled because of the kind of guy that, the kind of build that Emil Heineman has. I think he'll be okay. Generally speaking, I think that that won't have any long-term effects. It happened at such a crucial part for him and for the Canadiens. Really, they were coming out of that Christmas break. They had won. They'd beaten the last 4 Stanley Cup champions on the road. Just kind of got their season back on track. And then Heineman got hurt, and they kind of fell apart again until they came back from 4 Nations, and then it was. They were incredible. He's got sort of that effect on you lower down the lineup for the Canadiens. So I think, it was more so just terrible timing for him he got hit right as he was picking up steam, and it was just really unfortunate.
We joke that he was the key to the entire Montreal Canadiens successful game, run, right? Like for those couple of months. I think he's somebody that that Islanders fans in particular will love, right? You do like your defensive hockey in Long Island. He brings a lot to a bottom six, and I think something that people often mistake for like bottom six players, particularly like if they're fourth liners, is they think they're replacement level. And I think in today's NHL, when everybody's just got so much knowledge, so much skill, and so much money to pump into their players, there's no such thing as a replacement level player. Like you can have a really excellent fourth line, a really excellent bottom six player. And I think that's what Emil Heineman is. Like, I think he brings a lot. I really do think that Islanders fans will love it. We loved him, right? We're going to miss him. Yeah.
We were bummed to see that he was part of that trade because and I think it was Arpon Basu of The Athletic who joked once the trade happened that the Islanders just got themselves an incredible trade chip because he's been traded for Sam Bennett. He's been traded for Tyler Toffoli, and now, for Tyler Toffoli, and now for Noah Dobson. So even if he doesn't hit for the Islanders, you're going to be able to flip him for a star player in a few years. So I hope that he hasn't taken that to heart. I hope he takes this as a bunch of teams want me, and they see value in me because look who I've been traded for, because he is a very valuable hockey player.
That's really good to hear because one thing the Islanders did lack last year was some physicality in the bottom six, and getting a guy who can add that dimension. And now with Matt Martin retiring, even less. So it's something the team needs, and I think he'll fit in very well in that regard.
Yeah, I think Ian pointed out. Sorry, I was going to say.
I think I'm going the same place that you are, that, the Islanders for such a long time have had great fourth lines. I think of Casey Cizikas. I think of Matt Martin. I think of those guys, Cal Clutterbuck when he was around. They like that kind of brand of hockey. And that's the kind of guy you're getting in Emil Heineman. He's going to he's also got a very underrated shot. I think there was a point in the season, I think, when he got hurt that he was third among rookie goal scoring. So, he can fire the puck. He was on the second power play unit. He's going to surprise you with that shot. But I think the Islanders fan base they're going to fall in love with this player. It's a very easy guy to really get behind. And I mean, we'll talk about the value of the trade in a moment, because I think the other two players that they got out of this are going to also be phenomenal hockey players.
Yes, absolutely. So maybe we'll start with the Islanders outlook first, because we really do want to get into the meat of that trade. And we'll go from there. And then later on in the show, we'll talk about the outlook for the Montreal Canadiens. So that's coming up in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% with their killer last-minute deals. If you ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy, the app will show you a panoramic seat view, so there's no surprises. And the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees with Game Time. And the Game Time guarantee has your back if your plans change, with cancellation protection and more. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's start with the outlook for the New York Islanders, because these teams are both teams that are, kind of trying to figure out what their future is. Islanders making a lot of changes in the offseason. Maybe let's start with that. Like, a little bit surprising, right? They went with literally the most old school GM possible, and then they went in the complete opposite direction. So what are your thoughts on that, Gil?
I think it was time. I mean, this is an Islanders team that went to back-to-back conference finals when COVID hit in 2020, 2021. And then in the 4 years since then, they missed the playoffs twice and got eliminated fairly easily in the first round the other two times. Lou had traded away 4 straight first-round draft picks. And that's not to say he didn't get good players in return. It's Bo Horvat, Alexander Romanov, Kyle Palmieri. He did benefit from those trades. But it seems like the team was stuck in the muddy middle, that they had 2 years ago that the Athletic ranked them as the worst prospect pool in the NHL. And I mean, when you trade away 4 straight first round picks, that's not a shock, right? Yeah. But because there was not a lot in the pipeline anymore and the team was getting older, it just seemed like it was, you're on a treadmill, but you're not going anywhere. So a change had to come. Lou Lamoriello didn't seem to want to make those changes. He really believed in the core. So, he traded Brock Nelson at the trade deadline, but didn't want to. And Brock sort of insisted, I'm not signing. I want to test the market. That reluctance to make changes, I think, made it clear that he had to be moved on from. And when you're hiring a new coach or a new GM, you always hire someone who's the opposite of the guy you just let go. So, yeah, they let go of the oldest school GM in the league, and they brought in someone who is new and has a different perspective.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Islanders having the worst prospect pool, because I don't think you can say that anymore. And that was a week. That was a week ago. And we're looking at a completely overhauled defensive or prospect outlook, starting obviously with Matthew Schaefer, who is going to be an electric player for the Islanders. How much do you think he changes for the Islanders in his rookie season? Should he make the team, which I can imagine, he'll make a good push at that.
Yeah, he'll make a push. Look, he's 17. He doesn't turn 18 until September. It would not shock me if he spends a year in college hockey somewhere. He has nothing left to prove in juniors at this point. And I can't imagine, I don't think he's eligible to go to Bridgeport in the AHL at 18. So it just becomes a question of whether he spends a year in college hockey or he makes the Islanders. I don't anticipate him being anything more than a third pair defenseman as a rookie. Maybe he'll see some time on the second power play unit where he's got a little more time and space to maneuver. But, you know, you don't draft a guy in the NHL with the rare exception of a generational talent for what they're going to do the year you draft them. You draft them for what they're going to become 2, 3, 5 years down the road.
Yeah, I think of Owen Power in Buffalo, right? Like he was drafted first overall, and those COVID era drafts, obviously a little bit different, but it was immediately, I'm going back to school for a year. I think defensemen especially, you want to take your time. It takes them a little bit longer to hit their peak to really understand what they are. And that's a kid you want to make sure that you're bringing up the right way. But then the two picks that the Islanders got from the Canadiens, sort of stunned by the two players that fell to them in that spot. First, Victor Eklund, of course, who's an undersized forward, but incredibly skilled. And Kashan Aitchison, who if Montreal had held those picks, I would have thought they'd be interested in a guy like Kashan Aitchison, sort of a throwback, violent, but offensively talented defenseman. How much do those guys overhaul the prospect system for the Islanders? And, does it sort of give you guys a new competitive window now that you have these 3 first-round picks in a row who are all going to be really impressive NHLers?
I think it does. I think what it does is, I mentioned in the last segment, we were stuck in the muddy middle. I think now all of a sudden there's hope for the future. Whereas before it was like, we're getting older. There's nobody here to take anybody's place. And, we're going to slowly sink. Well, now all of a sudden there is hope for the future. And while none of these players are likely to have a big impact this year, last year Cole Eiserman fell to the Islanders in the first round of the draft. That was the beginning of the repairing of the prospect pool. You add, 3 first-round picks this year, some good solid picks in the second and third round, and all of a sudden, 2-3 years down the road, when these older players are aging out and not able to do it anymore, you've got guys who potentially can come in and start a new era of hopefully successful hockey.
So I want to talk a little bit about Patrick Roy as well. Like, how much does he factor into the development? Because when I look at Patrick Roy, like he's very different than Martin St. Louis, right? Where is he? And I know he has a lot of experience coaching in juniors, right? Like in the Q, and all of that. So like, where does he fit in with kind of bringing up these younger players that he might not even see for another couple of years?
Well, obviously, you mentioned he worked in the Q, so he has experience working with younger players, and I think that's a big plus. And look, Patrick Roy did sign an extension last year, so he's going to coach this team. Matthew Darche kept him, so it seems like he's at least on solid ground. Now, if the team absolutely is dreadful this year, could that change? Maybe. But I think for now, Patrick Roy, they're trying to put together a team that fits his style of play a little more. And Lou Lamoriello didn't necessarily do a good job of that last year. The ironic thing was, 3 defensemen for the Islanders got hurt at the same time. So they brought in Tony DeAngelo, Scott Perunovich, and I'm trying to think of the third, but they brought in 3 smaller mobile defensemen. And they played their best hockey when those 3 smaller mobile defensemen were on the ice, because that's the way Patrick Roy wants to play.
Which is like, it's really interesting. It's also like, it's very telling. Like you couldn't remember who the guy was.
Yeah.
That's how this season went, right?
It is sort of how that season went. It was Adam Boqvist. I'm sorry. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Oh, there you go.
I do remember that guy. That's a guy.
Yes.
That's a
Yes.
guy.
And he's
So,
back,
yes. Last question before we move on to the Montreal Canadiens. Less of a question, a little bit more of an observation, really. I feel like Islanders fans right now are where Montreal Canadiens fans were a couple years ago in that Yuri Slafkovsky draft, because the Canadiens stocked up on picks. And all of a sudden, what seemed hopeless
Right.
like all of a sudden became so hopeful, right? And then 2 years later, or even a year later, people were starting to talk about how the Montreal Canadiens have one of the deepest, if not the deepest, prospect pool, right? Our good friend Tony Ferrari of the Hockey News did say they had the best one, I believe. It was his number one. And so now it's the Islanders' turn, right? And it's a really, really good feeling. Like I feel like from you've got the finger on the pulse. Like what do Islanders fans feel about this? Like, do they have that same level of excitement that we did?
I think they do. The comments on YouTube and in emails have been just, it's like a breath of fresh air. All of a sudden, you've been stuck in the house for so long, and then it's a beautiful spring day, and you go outside and you just take a deep breath of air, and you're like, you know? That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like.
It's definitely an exciting time, and like we can vouch that, like, you get a chance to enjoy this. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and where the Canadians are and the outlook for the Montreal Canadiens in just one moment. All right. So let's talk about the Montreal Canadiens. I feel like as we were talking, I started feeling like a little bit jealous of Islanders fans because I feel like it's not our party anymore.
Now, wait, you guys are a couple of years ahead of us in this. So your party could be coming very soon, or the different kind of party when you're actually a playoff team and starting to build toward that. So, I mean, tell me about that process. How do you go from that breath of fresh air that I just described to, okay, we're going to be good now. Like, we're going to be actually contending.
Yeah, I think it started this year really with some standout performances. Nick Suzuki finally became the first Montreal Canadian since Alex Kovalev to have more than a point per game in a season. So that was, taking that step, the first really truly offensive star that the Canadians have had in some time. Cole Caufield stayed healthy. That was a huge part of it. That's not something that we could have said in the past. Lane Hutson arrived with a capital A, in a way that I think we could only have imagined in our daydreams, thinking about that player. I think generally speaking, they got the average-ish goaltending that they needed, and everything kind of fell into place for them this year. Even though there are sections of the season that we look at and go, "Oh, that wasn't that strong." The highs were able to carry them through that. I think of coming back from Four Nations. Nick Suzuki told Kent Hughes, "Don't trade my friends away. Keep everybody here." And Kent Hughes said, "Okay, go win games." And Nick Suzuki turned into an absolute supernova and was able to get Montreal into the playoffs. I think that it's nice to see that step forward, and it's nice to see that the Canadians are recognizing that it's a step forward, and they're adding some future pieces now. They're adding some guys who are going to be part of it, but they haven't immediately, like they didn't make a huge mistake on free agency day, right? Like they didn't throw, a bunch of money at like an Ivan Provorov or somebody like that, right? Like that would be a mistake for a team at this point in their build. Now, next year, when they have $38 million in cap space or something like that, that might be a time to take a swing at a free agent. Right now, it's not, especially because they have to get all their young guys under the cap over the next year or so. So it's an exciting time. Like I do see this happening with the Islanders right now. Like it's actually a very good parallel. They get a first overall pick, they make a bunch of noise at that draft. They're kind of just retooling on the fly, and then they'll be ready to go. So I like where the Canadians are at. I'm very much a believer in what they're building. And now it's just a matter of, can these players execute on a nightly basis?
And it sounds like if I could sum up what you're saying almost in 3 words, it's trust the process.
Yeah.
You're bringing these kids along. There are going to be some ups and downs with younger players. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. You're going to have stretches where they're looking like they're meeting their full potential, and stretches where you're like, come on, why are you doing that? So,
yeah.
But over time, in theory, the good days start to way outnumber the bad days.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest, I think, good days was on the eve of free agency. We didn't think the Montreal Canadiens were going to do all that much. I mean, they did make a trade, right? They did some Laval depth signings, but we both agreed that we are not worried about our front office going out and making major mistakes, right? Like dropping too much money on a player that wasn't worth it, or overbidding because of FOMO, or making a panic trade or anything like that. We just knew that if the deal wasn't there, Kent Hughes was not going to make it. There was a deal, we did get Zachary Bolduc, but that was it. That was the deal that was available. That was the best for the Canadiens. And then in his media availability, Kent Hughes did say he wasn't done, right? So it's not like he sat there and he's like, okay, I have a team now. No, there's still holes in the lineup, and he's always going to be looking to improve it. And so, that I think that's one of the best things, because in the past, I don't think that we could have said that, right? Like, I do not remember a time with Marc Bergevin. I do not remember a time with Bob Gainey. I do not remember a time with what's his face,
Pierre Gauthier.
Pierre Gauthier, yes.
What an era that was.
I was going to say the disrespectful one.
He took the cookies off the plane. That was the big story. He didn't let the players have cookies on the plane anymore. Yeah, that was that era of Canadiens hockey. Brutal
That
stuff.
and the Camilleri jersey. I'm still
the Camilleri jersey. I will never forgive him for that. He did not. And for those who might not be aware of that story, Camilleri got traded in the middle of a game and wanted his last jersey, and Pierre Gauthier told him, "You have to pay for it." Essentially, just truly like Mr. Burns level evil sort of behavior by a general manager.
I think the only thing he did right truly was keep Price instead of Halak. I think that's the only thing that you can credit him for.
Boy, that's making me really worried that could have gone a different way. There's a different timeline where we keep Yara Halak, and maybe Price ends up an Islander like Halak did.
Yeah. And Halak was good for us for a couple of years. I'm not going to complain.
He was a great goalie.
He was. I think, with the GM thing, I think we saw something similar in Matthew Darsh's press conference with the Islanders, where he said something to the effect of, and I'm paraphrasing, just because you have cap space doesn't mean you have to use it all right away, that you have to think about what's coming down the pike. Who do you need to sign next year, the year after that? Where do you need to improve your team? Whereas Lou Lamoriello, look, old school GM, I have respect for Lou. He's in the Hall of Fame for a reason, and everything he accomplished in New Jersey, can't take that away from him. But he never really seemed to learn how to master the cap. And so every year he was putting out fires that he himself kind of set, trading Devon Taves because you had no cap room, trading Nick Leddy, having to trade Josh Bailey and throwing in a second-round pick to get under the cap. Those are things you don't want to be doing on a consistent basis. And so it seems like Matthew Darsh gets it. And that's, again, refreshing and encouraging.
Yeah, I think that's something that, like we saw it the other day with free agency, right? You look at all of the fresh, like, I don't want to say young because not all of them are young, but like all of the fresh, like forward thinking, new kind of GMs, like they were making the better moves. And the old school guys, we were looking at that and we're going like, why did you pay that much for those three guys? Right. And I think everyone knows which team I'm talking about right now when I say those three guys. So, I think it really is a scenario where just because a player was good in the past does not mean the game does not pass them by. Just because a coach was good in the past, or a coaching style or a goaltending style was good in the past, does not mean the game does not evolve. It does not mean it does not pass you by, right? Like you look at just like the way the players play on the ice now, it's unrecognizable from the lockout in 2005, right?
Yeah. No kidding.
Any last thoughts before we put this episode to bed?
I guess my question for you is this the year? Is this the year the Canadiens, start really taking it to that next level?
I think there's a legitimate chance that they take a step forward this year, because I think I had gone into the summer thinking, Montreal could very easily find themselves outside of the playoffs next year if teams like the Rangers and teams like the Bruins get their act together and get back into a position where they're playoff teams. And then I watched what the Rangers and the Bruins did headed into the summer, and I go, I'm not so sure that they're going to be playoff teams. So, it's really a race between Montreal. Ottawa's going to be in that mix again. I believe Detroit is going to make a better push for that. I'm hopeful Buffalo is, because I'm kind of just tired of kicking them while they're down. Because I'm thinking that things are going to get more competitive in the Atlantic. I think Toronto's taking a step back this year. I think Tampa could go either way. Really, they didn't do much in free agency. They're kind of just rolling it back with the core that they have. I think there's a legitimate chance we're talking about the Canadiens getting in and not just being like, hey, we're happy to be there, actually being a team that could do some damage. But if they miss the playoffs, it's not a failure of a season. It depends on how badly they miss, honestly. But I look at this season as another year of growth. And then the year after that, it's go time. Like that means like you're not finishing as a wild card. You're in one of those top 3 divisional seats. Like we need to start seeing that progress to believe that the contending status is achievable.
Yeah. And I think Kent Hughes' timeline when he talks to the press is always vague. It's like 2 or 3 years from now, right?
Yeah.
He said that last year. He's saying it again this year. I do think that, again, it's not a failure if they miss the playoffs. I think it depends on what happens, right? Like if they lose one player to injury and the entire season is derailed, then you know that this team had not enough depth, right? Or something like that. And so I feel like, and there's going to be a lot of players that take a step back, right? Like everybody had a stellar year last year. There were very few players that we didn't give good grades to this year, right? Everyone moved forward. So there is going to be some regression. So I do think though that if the Canadiens do make the playoffs, like I think there's a legitimate chance that unlike last year, like they do a little bit of pushing around or a little bit of putting some fear into the opponent, and it's an exciting time to be a Habs fan. It's a little bit more nerve-wracking right now than it was a couple years ago. So I'm going to say to the Islanders fans listening to this, enjoy this while you can, because then it gets a bit more stressful.
Well, I think once the season starts, look, this Islanders team is probably not a playoff team this year. If they do get in, it's because everybody plays like to their potential and nobody gets seriously injured. But sometimes you got to take one step back to take 2 or 3 steps forward. And I think as long as there's a plan in place and players in place to get you there, I think the hope is back, and that's a great first step.
Yeah, the Canadiens tanked for 3 years. I think the Islanders as a base level are in much better shape. I don't think they're going to have to tank for 3 years to get back to that sort of, playoff status.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I will say like the one team I cannot predict for the life of me in the Atlantic, sorry, in the Eastern Conference, let's say, is New Jersey. I have no idea how that's going to go.
Yeah.
Ever. Like it's been like, almost 6 years that I've been doing it. Like I'm completing the 6th year doing the show and I still cannot explain the New Jersey Devils. All right. Let's wrap it up. Let's start with Gil. Where can all fans find you and your show?
Well, Locked On Islanders on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, and on social media at Locked On Isles. And I'm on social media at Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI.
And Ian, do you want to take ours?
Yeah, we're Locked On Canadiens everywhere. We're posting things: Blue Sky, Instagram, and TikTok, YouTube for the podcast, as well as wherever you download your shows. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian on social media, and you can find Laura at The Active Stick.
And I want to thank everyone for listening, and we will all talk to you tomorrow on Monday.